Gary and Marilyn Peterson, and today we are going to tape our version of How I Met Your Mother, or in that 1950s and 60s TV show, This Is Your Life. Personal video for archiving, number 1, where Marilyn and I were born. Marilyn was born in Cleveland, Ohio, at Euclid General Hospital, off of 185th Street and Lakeshore Boulevard. The early years for Marilyn in this segment, all our relatives lived within a few blocks of each other in the same city and state. Mine were in Cumberland, Maryland, and Marilyn's were in Cleveland, Ohio, off of not 185th, but 200th Street and 185th, and Pawnee Avenue. And that was special because all these relatives lived very close to us and were very supportive. Marilyn lived at 18708 Pawnee Avenue with the following relatives nearby. Aunt Grace, who later married Mike Beck. So Aunt Grace lived at the Pura home on Pawnee Avenue for a while. Their grandfather, Marilyn's grandfather, and her brothers Phil and Jim, their grandfather was Liborio Piro, who was married to Maria from Little Italy in the Cleveland area. And Liborio lived with them and had bought the home in which her father Sebastian and her mother Grace, maiden name Lucido, they were married and lived in that home. So in this home, Marilyn was surrounded by family, aunts, uncles, her grandfather, and the neighbors. Aunt Betty was also a sister of Sebastian, along with Grace, and she lived nearby on Hiller Avenue off 185th. Aunt Betty was married to John Camella, and together they started Euclid Fish, for which became very prosperous. Marilyn's father, Sebastian, worked for Euclid Fish, did their books. He also was an accountant in his own business, and he also helped run their clam bakes. Now, Betty was not her real name, and if I can think of it, I'll give you her real name. Well, Betty was the nickname, but she had another name, which I can't think of right now. They lived on Hiller. Uncle Marty Lucido, Marilyn's mother's brother, and her uncle, of course, and he was married to Aunt Pauline. They had a daughter, Grace Ann, who later died of cancer at the age of 13. Marilyn and Grace Ann would play together. Marty and Pauline lived in Euclid off of Lloyd Road. Marilyn also had cousins who lived behind her, the Mamanas. Further down the street off of 185th Street was, and this was near the South Theater, lived her Aunt Kate Barber, married to Charlie Barber. And Aunt Kate, of course, was Marilyn's mother's sister. She helped raise Grace and Marty Lucido, and also 5 of their own children. And Uncle Charlie, married to Aunt Kate, has to be given a lot of credit for taking these kids in. Uncle Marty spent some time in a orphanage because his father, when he remarried, the wife wouldn't let him bring his children. So Uncle Marty did spend some time in an orphanage I believe it's Parmadale, which is in Parma, Ohio. So Aunt Kate and Charlie Barber helped raise a lot of children. How did Marilyn's mother, Grace, and Sebastian meet? The story is that they met on a CTS, a Cleveland Transit System bus, between downtown Cleveland and East 185th Street. The couple were married on October 26, 1940. Now, how did I meet Marilyn? Well, I knew of Marilyn from the time she was 13 and I was around the age of 15. And I met Marilyn through my good friend, best friend, Tim Ryan. So that would be around 1958 when I first met Marilyn. And I saw her sitting with Tim Ryan on the porch in Euclid, Ohio, off of East 213th Street, in a home that was owned by the parents of Phyllis Winfield. And Phyllis Winfield had a party, and Tim was invited, and I was invited through Tim to go to that party, and I saw him sitting with Marilyn on the porch. I met Tim Ryan in Willoughby, Ohio at Immaculate Conception School in 5th grade when my parents moved from Cumberland up to Willoughby, Ohio. My dad was a machinist, lost his job in Cumberland when the plant shut down, Celanese, and they moved up here to look for a job. My dad was trained as a machinist in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Later, Tim and I were separated when I and my parents were moved from Willoughby to Cleveland, Ohio, off of Superior Avenue on East 124th Street. And I went to school on 123rd Street at a school there, St. Agatha. But we kept in touch by writing and calling, and we did keep in touch that way. Okay, so we didn't start dating, Marilyn and I, until 1964. I was in college in Frostburg State in Western Maryland. Excuse me. When I went with Tim in his camera equipment to pick up Marilyn at Dyke College, downtown Cleveland. Marilyn was there learning and training to be a legal secretary. Tim was driving at that time a Corvair convertible that was written, of course, the Corvair was written by a book on Unsafe at Any Speed by Ralph Nader. But anyway, it was a nice looking, sleek looking car, even though it wasn't safe. But I had to squeeze into the front seat. It was a purple Corvair, and they had Tim had black bucket seats. And the back seat was filled up with camera equipment, so I was going to have to sit in the front next to Marilyn as Tim was going to be driving. Tim brought Marilyn out and then had to go back in and get some more equipment. So I got out of the car and got Marilyn in, and I had to squeeze in next to her in the bucket seat. And I broke the ice by saying a joke to Marilyn. If I said I liked her body, would you hold it against me? And she giggled, and we started having a conversation. And I never really felt so much at ease with another girl or woman as I did with Marilyn. And so we started talking, and I felt at that time that I was going to ask Tim Ryan later if he was seriously dating Marilyn, if I could take her out. And that night when I called him, he said no, he wasn't dating her seriously, that I could take her out. So I called her up and asked her to go out with me on a date dancing at a place in Eastlake off of Lakeshore Boulevard called Culp's. And they always had bands there and a pretty nice sized dance floor. And that's when I found out that Marilyn was such a good dancer and so easy to talk to. And when I would say anything that began with the letter P, she would blink and giggle. And I just fell in love that night. So that's how I met Marilyn and how we started dating. And then we eventually got married in 1967. So it would be 3 years later from 1964 when we started dating. In between is another story, and we'll pick up with that a little bit later on. So right now I'm going to give this girl a kiss and thank her for marrying me. And we are now married for 56 years. Last year we celebrated our 55th anniversary, the Emerald anniversary, and I gave Marilyn a ring on that day, an emerald ring, and mine is in the file cabinet. It's pretty big, and we both have Claddagh rings. Mine's silver and Marilyn is gold. And that ends this episode 1.